Professor Zuber-Skerritt, convener of the third postgraduate research and supervision program funded by the Federal Department of Employment, Education and Training, Australia. Professor Zuber-Skerritt introduces this video program.
The videos are based on recordings of a staff development program for supervisors of postgraduate students in the newly amalgamated university campuses. This program was held at the Hyatt Regency on the Gold Coast of Queensland in Australia in September 1995. New university campuses, established since 1987, have experienced many exciting challenges. These can be observed in at least 4 areas. 1. Staff facing the transition from a purely teaching role to the responsibilities as researchers and teachers of postgraduate research students. 2. Staff having to teach increasing numbers of postgraduate students with reduced resources. This has often led to increased staff workload and stress. 3. Universities facing increasing accountability to research students, society, employers and taxpayers. All these stakeholders have a legitimate right to expect this accountability in terms of quality outcomes and cost effectiveness. 4. Staff being expected to upgrade their academic qualifications through PhD studies, while at the same time having to supervise postgraduate research students. How then can we assist the new university campuses in further improving the quality of postgraduate education and fostering an institutional research culture? This video series and accompanying written materials aim, first, to improve the quality of university teaching and learning at the postgraduate level in the new university campuses. 2, to develop postgraduate supervision skills in a way which will achieve a multiplier effect in each institution. 3, to provide support materials, of which these videos are a part, and which can be used by the participants and others in their own institutions. 4, to address existing and new issues in postgraduate supervision and generate solutions to these problems from the participants themselves, in conjunction with national and international leaders in this field. I hope you will appreciate the following video.
It's good morning from him and it's good morning from her. Good morning and welcome to Friday. I'm MacKay, University of New England, new entity, is it? Yes, somewhere like that. And my background goes through from chemistry, doctorates in chemistry, through education and now in staff development. Writing is one of those things that I put off till the last minute. And I'm trying to develop strategies to overcome that. I'll talk about some of those today. In our session on, as you'll notice, is on publishing and writing. Nanette, might like to introduce yourself.
Good morning everyone, I'm Nanette Gottlieb. I'm from the Department of Asian Languages and Studies at University of Queensland. My background specifically is in Japanese. I have done a bit of writing on writing and supervising the writing process during the PhD, which is something that I'm very aware of the difficulties of. I also write a lot myself in terms of my own research, and it's never an easy process. And I'm just hoping to pass on some practical tips that I've gleaned through my experience and that of others. Thanks, Graham.
What are we going to do this morning? Firstly, our objectives are to, as you can read there, to provide supervisors with some effective management strategies which you can employ to prevent their own thesis from sinking to the bottom of the pile and pass on to students to help them complete on time. Okay. Suggest strategies for publishing during candidature for both staff and student, and to involve those present in active consideration of how these issues impact on their present practice. There's also some ways in which computers may be used in getting started being more organised and productive in the writing process, and also to develop more communication and understanding during writing process between supervisor and student. Quite a lot in 2 hours. Now, how we want to achieve that, we have 3 distinct sessions. The first one will be probably a little after this introduction, will be one about time management and writing. What we'll be doing is having an introduction for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll get you to work in groups on a few issues and questions, and there'll be a couple of groups reporting back, 3 only because of our time factor. Then we'll move into the second section, which is on publishing and candidature for 40 minutes. Again, there'll be an introduction from both of us. We'll sort of try and do our song and dance act as quickly as we can and get you into some discussion. And then third bit, I'd like to talk about computers and the writing process and some of the issues there. Everyone happy? Know what we're doing? Great.
When I started to think about time management, which everybody agrees and the literature agrees is very important when you're trying to get a thesis finished or other writing, I just wrote down some of the calls that we have on our time as academics. Teaching, admin, student counselling, more admin, community service. Some of you will be writing grant applications, some of you may be doing consultancies as well. More administration. I'm speaking from the point of view of my university. I assume it's the same in yours with the administration. Supervision of other people's research, of postgrad students, trying to do your own research as well, publish your own articles and books. Some of you are writing a thesis at the same time as being a full-time staff member. And then at the end of all that, there's that little thing called life. These are just a few reasons why time management is important. And again, I'm sure that you can add your own to this list. Your students need to be well aware of how to manage their time in writing their thesis, because if they don't use time management techniques, then they may not finish in the minimum time. If they don't finish in the minimum time, then if they're on a scholarship, that scholarship will run out. If they're full-time students who don't already have a job, then they need that thesis in order to be able to move on to an academic job. Most institutions are looking at a PhD as a Lecturer B qualification. Some even look at it for Lecturer A, as you'll know from your own experience. If you're a staff member working on a thesis at the same time as you're working full-time, then you want to get your thesis finished so you can get your life back. Practically, the sooner you have your degree under your belt, then the sooner you can apply for promotion in most institutions. So to get your thesis finished, if you're working as an academic and also doing a postgrad degree, you need to structure your time between all the other competing demands that you have on you. One thing that our department has done successfully in the last 3 to 4 years or so is to insist that all staff set aside 1 day a week for research, whether it's on their higher degree or on their other research. Something that anybody can do is prioritise the tasks confronting you. Everybody knows this. And then on the micro level, planning for the thesis as a whole, doing a mind map or a flowchart, whatever you want to call it, for the thesis as a whole. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but it gives you some guidance in the beginning stages of how to approach your data collection, and then within each chapter as well. And the other thing, of course, is not to leave writing up, the dreaded word writing up, until the end. Peggy Nightingale's talked a lot about this in the research that she's done on writing, as have other people. What we'd like you to do for the next 20 minutes or so is, at your tables, talk about this question: what 3 realistic strategies could you implement immediately to help you get your degree finished, if you're doing one, and get on with your life? Or if you're not doing a degree, to help your student finish their degree. We'll ask you to write your 3 strategies per table on an OHT, and then we'll ask some of the tables, 3 of the tables, and we're not telling you which ones, to report back at the end of the workshop just briefly before we go on to the next activity.
Please stop the tape, allow 20 to 30 minutes for groups to answer the questions, and appoint a spokesperson to report.
So could we have reports, please, from this table here and the one up the back next to the door, and then this table down here next to this door, please.
Okay, we were told to do 3 points, so of course we did 6 or 7. This is normal. Basic ones seem to be in control of your own life, to organise your priorities, to reassess them regularly. If you don't have a list of priorities, then you tend to get lost in the maze. Second, to plan and structure as much as possible, chapters, the whole thesis, everything, in order to make writing easier when you finally get to it. Refuse to do non-essential tasks on the basis that if it's really important, it will come back and land on your desk again. But nevertheless, if you're a female, especially beware of sexist assumptions, because seems to be an assumption in many departments that if you're female, you are sort of going to be coping with all the mothering type roles. And if you don't do them, then you're not a real woman or something. Okay. Fourth, learn to say no, which I suppose is really a subset of number 3. Particularly important for students, especially taking on, I think what was the demonstrations, extra work, things like that. Have a rewards, the next 2 were the sort of the good bits, like having a reward system for when you actually achieve your goals, and schedule some rest and recreation on the basis that if you don't have it, you're likely to burn out.
We talked about several other strategies, but these were the 3 that kept coming through. 1, to remove oneself physically from the campus to avoid interruptions. If you're going to set aside a one-day writing research session, it seemed in our experience that if you're physically on the campus, the minute the students sniff out your presence, then, I mean, you're gone.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. We'll move on to the next section, which is about publications during candidature. I always feel this needs to be kept in perspective sometime. One of my colleagues in the next building has a sort of a cartoon up on the wall which has got Christ on the cross and 2 academics looking up at him saying, "He spoke well, but alas, he never published." And I think this area of publishing, if we want to take it in that broad sense, is an area that we do need to give a bit more thought to.
Thanks, Graham. I'm just going to speak briefly on why publish during candidature. I'm coming from a base of believing firmly that that's one of the best things a supervisor can do for a postgrad student, is to encourage publication during candidature. Now, I know that there are 2 schools of thought on this issue. There are those who agree with me, and there are those who say, no, focus solely on the thesis. Don't waste your time on publishing things which may not help you achieve that goal. The second one there is that whether or not a student is accepted for a well-known international journal, the fact is that those journals, the better known they are, the better their standing is, have editorial boards and use referees who are well-known and prominent scholars in the field. Looking at number 5, assuming that people are successful in having their chapters or parts of their theses published, that benefits each department, as you will know, in terms of the productivity index that university research funding is distributed to departments on. The more publications that a department has, the more that postgrad students contribute to that index, then the more money flows into the department the next year for the benefit of those same postgrads and staff. And of course, the best reason is that one of the criteria that PhD examiners are asked to address in their report is whether or not this work is of publishable standard. Now, if you can have attached to the back of your PhD 1 or maybe 2 off-prints of your publication of part of that thesis coming from a well-known journal, then how can an examiner say, no, it's not publishable? The proof is right there in front of them. Now, how can we as supervisors help with this? One thing is related to time management, the first thing up there. The supervisors should insist, I believe, that after 6 months, 9 months at the most, I'm talking here about a full-time student, The student is able to state the topic or the central research question in one long sentence. It's important to ask for regular submission of written work right from the very beginning, just a little bit at a time. There are all sorts of ways that you can do this. And if you look at some of the publications of Peggy Nightingale, I think in the book that Autran edited in 1992, there's one which gives a list of ways that you can encourage a student to do this. A simple one might be just to get them to write an account of how they came to choose that topic in the first place. You can run regular writing workshops within the department on topics such as those listed there, or in the case of our institution, you can have counselling services come in and run it for you. I don't know about other institutions whether those services are available. You could consider instituting an action learning writing group of students and staff together in your department. And of course, everyone can use department seminars as dummy runs for feedback on chapters or papers. I really believe strongly that the role model in this function is very important for the supervisor to provide in helping our postgrad students to write and to publish during their candidature, because if you publish regularly, first of all, you're setting a practical example. If you don't just publish regularly, but you also interact with your student on a human basis and say, oh, I wrote what I thought was a good article and it was rejected, to let them know that you face the same problems that they do as publishers, as active researchers trying to get your work published, or, well, look, this article that I wrote was a real stinker to write. I had these problems, but I had a note yesterday to say it's accepted. If you let them see your human face as a researcher and a publisher, the difficulties and the triumphs that you experience too, feedback from students that I've talked about this with at my own home institution says that that goes a long way towards encouraging them to try the same things, because the power relationship in the supervisor-candidate base is often that the student regards the supervisor as somebody who knows it all already. And if you can indicate to them that it's an ongoing, lifelong process, you don't know it all already, but you're learning just as much as they are, you've just had a few more years at it under your belt than they have at the moment, it helps their confidence enormously. And of course, from a practical point of view, if you're experienced as a publisher yourself, then you're able to advise people how to go about publishing parts of their thesis. Among the papers on your table, you'll find a copy of this article called When It's Publish or Perish, Tips for Survival by Jane Stake. It's from a book called Career Guide for Women Scholars that somebody showed me. It's not limited to women. There are some very handy tips for anybody starting to publish, starting to build up a publishing profile there. I've just extracted some of her main points, all of which are fairly commonsensical and obvious. Things like thoroughly researching the journals in your area, which one is the most appropriate. If you've got a choice between a top-level international journal and, say, a national journal, go for the top-level one first. Always have, of course, an alternate journal in mind in case it's not accepted for the first one. Then you have to consider the average length of the review process. Some journals are wonderful. The best I've ever had was 12 days turnaround. And her final tip, although there are many more in the article, is not to put all your research eggs into one basket. And she specifically suggests what I've been talking about, which is publishing chapters from the thesis, not storing it all up for the book after you get your thesis. I think we might have to start now on our second workshop activity. We'd like you to work in small groups as you did before, but this time, looking at the question up there, with emphasis on the word realistic. What realistic goal could you set for publication during your own or your student's candidature? And if you could write on the OHTs again, please, we'll have some tables to report back.
Please stop the tape, allow 20 to 30 minutes for groups to answer the questions, and appoint a spokesperson to report.
One counter-argument to the neighbouring table. Much of what you had up on your overhead and much of the discussion has been about publication during the thesis in output terms. benefits to the university, benefits to whomever. And really the main point has been missed, and that is the role of publication in the training process. The key reason to publish is that it is a central part of research training and training in how to write. And there is no other reason for doing it during candidature, in my opinion.
Okay, I'll hand over to Graham now to finish off the session.
I just want to look a bit more at using computers in writing, and I just want to just wonder whether anyone's used these sorts of writing tools for collaborative work. Has anyone used Collage at all on campus? Okay, well, I just mentioned that as a bit of software that is free. It comes, as you'll notice, from as part of things that you probably have or seen on your campus of Mosaic, Telnet. They all come from the University of Illinois. And Collage is one of those programs that allows 4 or 5 of you to work on the same document at the same time. So you can sort of sit around campus and all come in together and start writing. You don't need to have 5, but 2. You can work with 2 people, and you can work on a modem somewhere else and phone in on the system. And it was designed mainly for the science area because it's got graphics interface as well, so you can design and make up graphs as you go along, and you can work and write the paper together, which raises interesting issues. You can use something like Talk, which is a Unix system which allows you to be at separate places and write the same document, but it is limited because you can't import a file or something you've been working on into the situation to work on. So it's a bit limited, but I just mentioned that Collage is one that's available for you if you want to go into this area of collaborative writing. I just want to say a little bit about computers and writing, because it's of course influenced so much of the things that we're doing at the moment. It's changing our practices. Oh, it's all there. Wonderful. But it's raising new problems. Just one last week, a student saying, I was reading stuff they'd written. I said, where did you get that from? That's a great idea. They said, oh, I found it on email the other day. And I said, well, who did it belong to? I said, well, I don't know who it was. I mean, how do you reference stuff on email anyway? So I just took the idea. It's a good one. And it raises, I think, a whole lot of issues of where we get material from and who we acknowledge. Another thing that came up in the last month was a lecturer who said, I'm giving up publishing in normal journals. He said, there's only about 400 read that environmental journal. I'm publishing on the internet because there's 7,000 on it already. And saying, my work, I'd rather people read it than in fact just play the game, the publication game. And that I'm finding happening more and more. And it's one that we need to have a look at. We're going to have a lot of challenges, even on our postgraduate supervision in the future, of people offering to do this supervision using computer-based email and World Wide Web. And we've got to see the world as our area rather than just maybe our state or Australia. And that's going to have some challenges for us. This problem of, in the word processing, of having the seamless integrated web into one document raises this question of originality and uniqueness. And it also raises the problem in some of the science and medical areas where the electronic media is where the cutting edge of the new ideas are, and the published work that we're talking about is the retrospective stuff that comes a few months later. And so that's changing the nature of ideas and the supervision process as well, of where we're getting and putting our major ideas up and the sort of nature of the dialogue that's going forward. Carolyn Dowling at ACU in Melbourne has written quite a bit on this sort of computer-mediated creation of text and some of the more subtle things that are starting to develop in that area. And a number of writers, there's about 5 or 6 of them in the last few years, have been drawing attention to what they say with this mouse-driven Windows environment of the presentation of text by Mac and Windows diverts the attention of writers from the context of their work to more superficial considerations of presentation, while an illusion of productivity is maintained through a flurry of key pressing and mouse clicking. And I think that of the presentation of text by Mac and Windows diverts the attention of writers from the context of their work to more superficial considerations of presentation, while an illusion of productivity is maintained through a flurry of key pressing and mouse clicking. And I think that there's an area there that we need to consider. And it's showing quite clearly that in our writing, it's developing, in some cases, a more condensed style. A lot of writers are using more shorter words, simpler sentences, because they're having problems with keyboard skills. And also, certain words are being avoided because of certain combinations on the keyboards which they avoid using cues and other things, and it's changing the nature of the selection of words in writing as well. It's also, in Sharple's work, sort of saying we may need to encourage what he calls the rhythms of writing, that we need to be able to move from computer to pencil and paper for different tasks of the process of writing that are more comfortable for many of our students and for ourselves. He's looked at the difference between a planning phase and a discovery phase in our writing, that some people want to work with pen and pencil and others want to work with computers. And it's an issue we've got to face. When I visit Carnegie Mellon, they give all the students computers when they enrol. After 6 months, 25% of the students hadn't even unpacked them out of their boxes. They wanted to keep writing with pencil and paper, and that has to be faced. This question of ownership of the text is one. We haven't got much time to look at that, but one of the major problems with computer writing is in the area of editorial change. And I'll just leave your thoughts there that from Chandler, who says the habitual use of the word processor may make users feel that writing must always be polished. Writing done with a word processor can easily lose freshness or spontaneity, becoming a composition. An over-enthusiastic editing can also result in writing of excessive length, in the loss of linear or narrative structure, which may be essential for a particular style of understanding. There's the added difficulty experienced by some writers in response to apparently infinite malleability of word process text in an inability to decide upon the point at which the writing task should be regarded as complete. And Chandler says, I like this, words and sentences become an urgent and irresistible itch to be scratched. And so you keep seeing it there, think, I must keep changing it, I must keep changing, because word processing, we've got the concept of value adding every time we do something to it. But we may not be doing that in the writing process. Think about that in the sort of the way that we're asking students to keep revising, in our own writing of keeping revising and revising. I sort of developed, just for the conference here, let's have a look at a conference folder and let's have a look. One of the things that I did was develop for each of the students now a little project organiser, so that we are on the same wavelength of getting organised. And it's just a little hypercard stack, and those who use Macintoshes might want to use that, but we use it in different ways. And it's one where we keep track of projects that are on. For example, we might, we have projects that might be chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and we decide what sort of information we're going to keep. Because finding students after 3 or 4 years start losing track of files, of data files and writing files, and they're trying to find everything and bring it back together. And we're trying, just by each having one of these for it, that we can change the sorts of for example, stages that we have. We might say we want drafts, let's say data. We might want a folder on what else we want. Literature survey, literature. And we might want areas of drafts. And all these could be all different documents, might be. And when we finish with those, then we can go back, and that will define then whatever we use for the next project. So we might have a new project, and we might chapter 1. So this is basically just an organiser, and we should now have chapter 1, and when we click on chapter 1 we should have those, and we can, each of those will be a folder, and we can keep all the material in it, keep track of those, and it'll go off and run those various applications across the computer. A couple of things here that think and write. Look, this is something very simple, a very simple program. It's about $60, but I found with some overseas students that I need to, for writing, to use something like this. I know I shouldn't need to do it, but in fact I find there was a recommendation yesterday that we might have a new card, and we might have another card. Let's see if we can create 2 cards here. 2 cards, and we can move these cards around, and we can organise them, and when you click on each card it comes and looks like a card. And so with a number of students I said, how do we get started? Well, I said, well, we have a card for references they might be working on, or ideas, and you can organise and just move these ideas around on the screen and reorganise as they were the chapters and bring them together. And of course when you print it out, it prints out as a normal document. That's a little one that I find particularly helpful, because I find that a lot of people in transitions in their lives on Piagetian terms need to often go back to something very concrete before they move on to abstract things. And so they might come in from high school in undergraduate study and need some very concrete, and then move to abstract. And often a number of students, particularly overseas students coming in, need some very concrete things before they can move on to some more abstract thinking. 2 programs that I'm finding very useful with students. One is Inspiration. Has anyone used Inspiration? And also StorySpace. Anyone use StorySpace? Okay. Well, we'll have a look at StorySpace first. It's one of those mind mapping, it can be one of those mind mapping sorts of programs, and just to sort of show you, to develop webs, what you can do in these sorts of things is you set up ideas, and I'll just mention to you, you can play around with them later. You set up each of these, and within them you can create documents within it and link ideas together. And this one is, that was the cover page you were looking at there. You can just click on some of these and hopefully write in selected spaces, and you can fill in the ideas. And so in fact I've been trying with students starting off in their project is to start developing ideas and seeing the interrelationships between them. It's proving quite a useful little program, very easy to use. You can play around with it. Again, for developing concept maps, they have some selected maps that are there. If you open the template, the one that I've mentioned and listed in your thing today is a simple mind map which you can use and start and play around with. And then you can, if you don't like things that are there, you can just highlight on bits and pieces and clear that out. And then you can just move things around. If you like this one here, I think you can just make a link across to somewhere else. And if you want to, you can make a comment about how those links are together. And I'm finding it with overseas students and others very good in getting research underway or getting a paper organised or other sorts of things that they need. Okay, well. Thank you very much indeed.